Welcome everybody here to the Martin Segal Theater Center. Cooper, is HowlRound on? HowlRound on. Okay, perfect. So my name is Frank Henschke and I'm the director of the Segal Center, and I'm going to thank also my team, which is Mia and Cooper and Mac, who are up there. And we are now going to the evening portion of the Young Producers Day. We had very good afternoon sessions, was on budget, how to get the word out on the PR and marketing, and also how to think about fundraising in a new and in a different way. So this evening we have the panels with our producers, a next generation of producers, but luckily with us we have Anne, who gave a wonderful talk, Hamburger, about her work, which she just produced out there in Red Hook on a boat, the wind and the rain, and now we are coming to 3 panels, and we have the experience at the Segal Center. It's better to have 3 shorter panels than 1 long with 8 people focusing on the work. So we would like to thank you all really for taking the time out of your life to be with us. We feel there is a new energy. We heard this morning Emily, who was here on the marketing, she says she's picking up that there are lots of companies are being created, that plays are getting out, new artists are there. So this also is designed to be a boost, a little shot in the arm, and also to say it's important to produce, to have new producers, first projects, and but it's not so easy to get access to knowledge and experience once you're outside the school or from books, because things have changed radically. So this evening we hear from a new generation of producers who have made their experiences and they are willing to share it. And then also you will know who they are, what they do, and I know also you once all sat into audiences when other people were talking. So you know this is kind of a natural, I think, thing, and we are thrilled to have you all here, and also in such big numbers. We were a bit worried. If you have a cell phone, just make sure it's out, that it says silent. And yeah, we were worried about it. We had an audience that's shortly before Thanksgiving. So welcome everybody again, and thanks to HowlRound for streaming us across America, but also for our international audience. We have quite a lot numbers of countries that always follow our programs. So we go maybe down the line very shortly, say who you are and what you do. And Sami, we'll start with you.
Sure. I'm Sami Pyne. I use she, her pronouns. I am the producing director of a company called ArKtype, where we specialize in new work development, specifically around experimental work for international touring. And we're also the producers of the Under the Radar Festival, which is an experimental theater festival that happens in New York City in January.
Wow, that was so incredible. I don't know if I can be that quippy. My name is Morreale. I use she, they pronouns. I'm currently the associate producer at SoHo Rep. Also does new work development. We support artists at key junctures in their career who are doing civically engaged work. And we make tailor-made development processes for them, bringing them from wherever they are to hopefully wherever they're going. So that's a real treat. My practice itself is facilitation. So I work as a director, dramaturg, producer, mostly just engaging with artists to figure out like what is the seed of your work and how can we resource it with money, humans, how can we facilitate and weave what you need to support the work. Yeah.
Well, you all heard from me already. I don't know, do I need to? Is this for the HowlRound thing, in case somebody hasn't? Okay, well, hello. I'm Annie Hamburger. I'm the executive artistic director of On Guard Arts, founded in 1985, still going strong, doing site-specific theater, new work from the ground up, taking risks, doing multidisciplinary work, and loving what I do.
Thank you so much. Just to point out, the Samis, both of them were prelude producers at a certain time.
During the pandemic.
During the pandemic, you know, and both of them actually, that is true, and once or twice even you participated in it, so we have a close connection to the New York theater scene. So we have, this theme is producing after COVID, during COVID. We all pretend it didn't really happen. It's such a long time ago. The effects are still there, not only mentally, but also the landscape has changed. Maybe tell us all a little bit, what did you do during the pandemic and what are you doing now?
I'm happy to start. The hesitance.
I just heard me talk for an hour, so Frank's like, "No, let him go." Okay, go ahead.
This is the pandemic is actually, and Prelude is actually where Sami and I met. Thank God. We produced the virtual festival Prelude because the pandemic was occurring. I guess a bit of context about me to know where I'm at in my career too. I graduated from undergrad in 2019. So I really started a career, was having a blast, moved to New York in February of 2020. And we all know what happened next based on that reaction. So in a lot of ways, I actually don't think I've known a field pre-pandemic. And I think that that's helpful, beneficial in some ways. Something else that I think is true of young producers that feels like it's been alluded to is just that I think the beginning of my career really felt like I was working in the gig economy just as every other artist is. It was a lot of contract for a period of time, freelance gig for a period of time, probably doing and putting too much on my plate to survive and pay my bills. When I graduated, I was very scared of freelancing, and so it was really funny to end up in a situation where it was the only choice. And since then, I work institutionally. I'm still supporting a lot of independent projects. And I do also struggle with this idea of post-pandemic. We are, just to make sure we're all on the same page, still experiencing a global pandemic. I would encourage you maybe to mask, perhaps to get your vaccines, get your boosters. This shit is still going around and it is still harming the least amongst us most. So just to really encourage a bit of a disability justice lens on that. I think that we can all be doing better. We all want to go back to normal, whatever that was. But I think my truth of what I've been witnessing is actually just an exacerbation of the capitalist realities that we live in through the impacts of the pandemic, right? I think that as a producer, trying to hold artists right now, trying to think about the fiscal resourcing, it's just everything is way more expensive. When I entered SoHo Rep, they were literally coming back for the first time. I came into maybe the second show of the post-pandemic season where we were all learning new protocols, we were all learning the new realities that we were functioning under, and every story that I was being told was just that everything is more expensive. We were getting bids that were coming back much higher than anything that we'd seen for sets, for rentals, for lights, for sound equipment, and thankfully, I work at an institution that wasn't allowing the labor lines to really plummet while we were dealing with that reality as well. It's one of the reasons that I went to the institution is its dedication to employing artists and paying them well. There's still work to be done, keep them humble. But I've been really fascinated with how you have to be reckoning with that if you want to hold anti-racist principles or anti-oppressive principles, liberatory practices in your work. There's a lot of contradictions that we must work through to maintain that, the kind of human forward producing practice. And I do think we're at a pivot point where I don't know if any, I'd be curious what you're doing. I don't know if I know any institution that is still testing, that is still requiring masking in any way. It's all kind of slowly dissipating into a normative culture, even though, again, all of the data is showing that we're not really seeing any difference in transmission rates that folks have from COVID infections. But that's my opening monologue. Thoughts?
Co-sign a lot of that. Yes, Sam and I met during the pandemic, and this is only the fourth time in which Sam and I have been, I think, in the same space, despite the fact that we collaborated virtually for months on end in 2020. I graduated with an MFA in theater management in 2020, a really good time to be walking out with a lot of student debt. I'll say that student debt still exists and still is real, so putting that out into the world that I made a choice for myself that I said I wanted to invest into my career, looking at the field ahead. And so that's a reality that we all have to grapple with. And I think that is something, certainly in a post-pandemic, post-COVID world, we should all be acknowledging more and more that there is either putting in an exorbitant amount of time into the field in order to escalate up that ladder and find yourself in these positions, or taking on a personal cost. It's a risk assessment that only you can make for yourself. But I would also encourage you to look at what entry-level jobs are paying inside of the theater, maybe before you're taking those kinds of risks on yourself. I had just come out of undergrad. I thought, like, I'm feeling really empowered about this, so let's go for it. And I don't regret it, but I think it is something worth naming, that the financial reality of individuals does dictate who gets to be in this field a lot of the time. During my my sort of post-graduation moment, I did find myself freelancing a lot, and freelancing honestly was the thing that allowed me to move up inside of this, I don't know, ecosystem, if you will, because I was able to have so many touch points with so many different organizations and different artists. A lot of time that looked like me taking on independent producing at a very low rate. I would say I started out anywhere between $500 for a project to $750 for a project. Again, the financial reality of what you can afford to pay yourself sets in those moments. And through that continuation of my own financial duress, if you will, being able to make those touch points with those artists, with those organizations, allowed me a great deal of exposure that ended up putting me in positions where suddenly I was being asked onto projects that were finally paying me enough to subsist, to sustain myself. And so I don't know, that also is sort of like, we've got a lot to talk about and unpack in the post-pandemic moment that we're talking about, but I do think something that we need to have more open dialogue about for administrators, for producers who are not only shouldering so much of the labor, but emotional work on top of the project that they are trying to bring an artist through, is the financial reality of what it takes to be inside of this seat. So I consider myself very lucky to have opened the right doors, to have found myself in the right place in the right time, working hard and continuing to keep that muscle going of constantly producing. But I do think it takes quite a lot for an individual to decide this is what I want to do. What do you think, Annie?
I think when you start out, you probably need a shit job. That's what I think.
So what was COVID for you?
Yeah.
And
So,
what did you do? Did it change your producing work?
Well, what COVID was for me is, I think I mentioned to you all earlier that we did this piece called Fandango for Butterflies and Coyotes. We opened it at La Mama, did 8 performances. I was very proud of it, really a beautiful Latinx team. And then we went on a 5-borough tour, and we went to Queens, and we went to Staten Island, and we loaded into the Lehman College in the Bronx, and we had the set loaded in, and the vice president came walking into the room in the afternoon in March 2020 and said, "You can't go on tonight." So then I heard of all these theaters. Everybody was closing down. Hello, beautiful. And I was like, Jesus Christ, girlfriend, you got this. The theaters are closed, but you do site-specific work, so get to it. So I had this idea, we talked about that before, that I like starting with ideas, and I said, I want to know what people are dreaming about right now. And I called up John Eisner, who I also spoke with you about earlier, because I figured, he knows more playwrights than anybody else. And so I said, John, I'd like to commission 12 writers and ask them, what are you dreaming about right now? And we started working together, became very close, and commissioned 12 writers to give us 3-minute dreams. And those dreams, they were writers like Lucy Thurber and Rahana Mirza and Lisa Jessie Peterson and Emily Mann and a lot of great writers. And their assignment was to send us a recording of a 3-minute dream. And then Irina Krushalina, who also came on board the team, who I mentioned to you, is doing Space Bridge as part of Under the Radar. Brilliant woman, see her show. The 3 of us worked together, and Arts Brookfield commissioned us to create an immersive installation inside of a 4,500 square foot empty storefront. And so we literally made a room for each dream that we brought to life with sets, lights, video, and sound. And we opened it in May of 2021, and we pulsed people through like a museum exhibition every 5 minutes, so that in the 12 rooms, there could only be a maximum of 24 people. And they had earphones on that we covered with little shower booties, and they filled out COVID forms, and it was the first time that many people came out
To see it.
to see something, because we were all just shut inside our places.
A question.
Hearing people's dreams, hearing these brilliant writers talk about their dreams of the future, their dreams they were having now, was very moving. And so it was just going, okay, how can I take this horrible situation and adapt to it in a way that I can make work?
Thank you. So this is what you did during COVID. For both of you, do you feel, you started out in some way during or after COVID, do you feel it is a completely new generation of producers coming up? Do you feel a connection to the generations before, like Anne, who's young at heart, of course, but also others, the Caleb and whoever, you have now in New York producing? Do you feel something has radically changed?
We were literally talking about this, I think, as we were standing in the corner. I think something both wonderful and complicated that is happening in this moment is that there is a new generation of leaders stepping into the American theater. That is also complicated because there are issues that have existed inside of the American theater for decades, and now there are even more issues on top of those issues that we're unpacking in this post-COVID moment. And so I do see a new squad coming in, if you will, but I also see them sticking around for a year or two and then leaving, because this is incredibly hard. It takes a lot of personal sacrifice in order to exist inside of this space, not to mention take care of yourself inside of this space. That's often the last thing on the plate, is sort of like, well, I can give this much to this project and this much to this project, and suddenly my pie chart has me like not even considered inside of that. So when I look to the generation above us and the generations above us, first, I work in a lot of international contexts, so I find myself in rooms where I'm consistently 15, 20 years younger than a lot of my colleagues, and we've talked a lot, or I've tried to be very open about what I feel is an infantilization of the new generation stepping into these leadership positions, that if we actually want to pass knowledge from leaders to the next generation of leaders, we need to be invited to the table and be part of the open conversations and not wait until it's your turn to be part of these conversations. That's I don't know. Do you feel, does that?
No, that's really like nail on the head. I mean, because also we don't, so I live on the cusp of like young millennial, old Gen Z. I like whatever that means. I like to say
we're lost.
Gen
Like,
Z.
what is that?
But I do think something that is, that like these generations share is actually like a relationship to existentialism that is not, it's just not the same as generations before us, I don't think. Like generations before us have been taught to like financially plan in ways that we have not, to family plan in ways that we have not, to build boundaries with workplaces in ways that we have not. Millennials, I think, like really shifted that culture, and we're like, no, I am going to do the things that I need. And I see Gen Z and like Gen, what's Alpha? What's the one after? Like coming up also with these like principles, these radical principles about how we hold each other in space, how we are going to show up for one another. And I can tell you, like, right, at a very tiny company, I am like second in the like chain of command right now, if you will. And like I feel I am not paid for the liability of like all of our employees, like holding all of our employees, but I feel that liability. Like my greatest gift is the opportunity to employ people and employ them well. I love doing that. It like brings me such joy. And I'm also sitting there like, if I don't do my job, these people do not get paid. Like these people will not have food on their table, roofs over their head. And I build relationships where I work. So I know what people are going through because I need them to be able to come to me and be like, yeah, my rent is due this week. I need you to, can you like up my paycheck? Because I want to work in places that will do that for somebody, right? Like there's ways that my principles, I will not let them go while I am working in practice in a way that I think that if you're beholden to these systems, you will. But like, quite frankly and quite publicly, I'm an anti-capitalist. Baby, this system is not serving us. It is not working. We are running ourselves into the ground. So the question is, while we know that we're functioning in a capitalist system, while we know that there's no way for any single one of us to like beat it, what are the practices that we are really shifting, the changes that we are making so that we might have some hope, like there might be something on the other side? I don't know, I really go back and forth between like deep nihilism and like deep utopia. That is something that you'll keep learning about me. But I think that there was something else that you offered actually earlier that feels important to touch on, which is, right, like, I think that we need to continue to have really frank and open, candid conversations about our finances together. Like, I think people are not doing that. I think that it is true that we are seeing leaders who are coming into leadership roles and then leaving. That definitely has to do with burnout that they're experiencing. It also has to do with, hopefully, like this principle that like, I actually won't latch onto this job for decades, right? I think that there's a way that we've seen generations of leaders do that actually just inhibits any change or any growth. Because right now, as I've said, like I think that we're in a generation of artistic leaders that can only build themselves up through a gig economy, as opposed to the generations before us have really been able to like climb ladders within their institutions. Not all of them. I don't like to universalize, or I don't mean to universalize, but that is like something that feels like a really key difference between what we're experiencing. And yeah, I think that like, to share my own finances publicly, like I come from a very low income background. I've experienced this houselessness in my life. The only reason that I was able to enter this field is because there were fellowships at the time that provided housing and gave me an $150 a week stipend. And that was enough for me to live, because the best advice that I've ever gotten was, you've always been poor, so why are you worried about being poor now? I think that has allowed me to think really tentacularly about what I'm doing with my resources and where I'm putting my time and energy, how I'm building myself up, all of these things. But I do think that we all, I don't know, just need to, I don't like that we think scrappily. I think artists deserve the world, but I also think that we're headed toward this like need for spectacle everywhere, that actually we're losing storytellers who can make something with cardboard. And I think that making something with cardboard is sometimes the beautiful magic that we need.
I have something also that I've noticed that pains me a lot, which is that there are institutions that respond to needing to install someone who represents a new generation, but they haven't done the work to set that person up to be successful. They're checking boxes, and a lot of times these boards of trustees, when there's a change in leadership, feel like they gain power, and they don't understand the choices that have been made. So no one, I don't care who you are, how brilliant you are, how much you want to make change, can step into leadership, especially of a larger institution that has creaky old ways with the spider webs growing off of all the thinking, with a board that doesn't want to face change and be successful. So I think the change that certain organizations are promoting is very misguided, because unless change really is embraced as a holistic endeavor, where the board, first and foremost, as people funding this organization, really take into account and are willing to weather change, which may mean losing a big portion of your subscribers, abolishing the subscriber form, which is probably, pretty antiquated and dated anyway. And so that really pains me, because I've seen a lot of pain, by organizations like Oregon Shakespeare Festival that hired Pornatake Garrett, who was then threatened by members of the community there.
Death threats to this black woman.
Yeah,
And her child.
And as I told you all earlier, I was at La Jolla Playhouse for a year, and I wasn't supported by the board in ways that caused me a great deal of pain. And so I just feel like it's not just a matter of wonderful visionary fighters like you all, but really like the old creaky people who are like my age, like getting off their butts and really doing some, I'm not creaky, but at any rate, really doing some self-exploration together and in a group to say, if we really want change, what does it mean? So that people can be successful.
Thank you. It's a very important point. Now also to the both Samis again, what are the new rules? What you cannot or don't want to do anymore that was done before? What are you facing? What world is that?
I work at a company that has an independent producing model to it. So the idea that there are rules is kind of open for discussion. My colleague Tommy Kriegsmann and I work on a project-by-project basis and also work on a festival that is inherently migratory, moving through a lot of different institutions. And so I guess what I can say about rules is I do get a window into 25 different institutions across the course of the year. The rules that, I don't know, that I think there has to be some understanding of people having lives outside of this thing. I think it's a matter of I need to go take care of myself, and I need the trust that when I go to take care of myself, my employer doesn't think that I'm shirking duties because I need to go take care of myself or take care of my child or take care of my family member. Those are the things that feel more prevalent and moving through that a new generation is not willing to accept, to say, no, you can't. I mean, I heard horror stories from advisors where they would have to lie about having dentist appointments in order to pick up their children from school. Sometimes these were mostly women or female identifying individuals. I think those rules are starting to really get pushed back against. But also, I'm not seated inside of an institution in a way that it feels like I have a playbook. I'm kind of rewriting a playbook every time we work on a project. Both wonderful and awful, as you can imagine.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think like every single project, even within an institution, particularly at an institution that has the value of like tailor-made development, it's like it is its own new mini theater company that has its own culture that needs to be shaped and held. And I think it's our job as producers to really like imagine how to shape and hold that, and to imagine things from the ground up. So also in that way, I'm like, what are the rules? I don't know. Like there are things there are compliance structures that we are beholden to. I am very interested in pushing against many of them because I know where many of them come from, and I know what they're trying to do to us, and I am not so interested in that, So there is also a reason that this happens, but like anything, there's always a dual side, right? Like I'm being a little right. I'm not speaking with the exact language of like I'm here to pick up the least among us, the marginalized among us. White supremacist culture also just like remakes the rules and like makes it very hard to learn like what this is. This is one of the reasons why I'm like, do I grad school or don't I grad school? Personally, is that I'm like. It would give me maybe a leg up to show somebody that I could manage a budget of a certain size, or I have the compliance structure in my brain. But what I've learned on the job is that nobody really knows what they're doing. We're all just trying to hold each other, right? Like that just keeps being a truth that I experience over and over. But in terms of, right, like what's changed? Like what? Can you ask this question again?
I think what this is speaking to, like our inability to talk about what the rules are and what they're changed, is the fact that I think our approach is similar. I won't speak for you, but that what we're pushing up against is the idea that there's a cookie cutter way to make this work happen and to work inside of this space. And in fact, what we have done, I would wager probably Annie also has done, is it is a recalibration and a reorientation of community to say, this is the problem at hand, and we're going to come up with a playbook that allows for us to solve this problem. The problem just happens to be artistic. And so that's where I sort of struggle with the idea of rules, because the idea that there's anything already situated on the board to begin with, and any types of these processes for me does not exist. It does feel kind of like, okay, we're starting from zero. There are inherently things that we know that we're going to walk into, but I'm not taking for granted a plan, a plan that is set in stone that I'm walking into and say, great, I'm going to execute on this plan.
Yeah,
I would just like to say one thing responding to what you said. Having worked for On Garde Arts, and then La Jolla Playhouse, and then Disney, and then back to On Garde Arts, I would say two things. One is, there's no road one can take that is without its pain and its benefits. And two, bigger is not always better. As a matter of fact, bigger can be worse in a lot of ways. I mean, I saw that at Disney. Like, the more successful I got, the more I had to manage politics and be in stupid meetings that didn't have any purpose, and the less fun I was having, And the more I had to manage all different kinds of people. So sometimes the gold, the jewel, can be in things, I talked about this earlier, things remaining purposely small. I think, as I also said earlier, we're living in a city that's expensive and difficult place to live. And I think one of the problems we face with this industry is you have great forward thinkers like these two and others who are pushing for change, and you have a funding situation that does not want change in many cases. The way the foundations work and government works, it's not acceptable to change.
To real change. Yeah. Just if I may be a little bit over time, and this is why we have three panels instead of one long with many. But to the both of the Samis, the question: what will you do different? What is your ambition? What is your vision? Where you say, this is what I want to contribute. This is why I do this. This is why I get up.
I've been really struggling with this question recently, I'll be so honest. And I think to continue whatever that honesty is, I feel in a very deep place of burnout already, where I'm I don't know that I can be a producer. The other thing is the field really wants to box you in. And I'm I don't know that I could be a producer forever in this way. My purpose, my vision is that we continue to all see each other as producers. I think something that has to change if we're committed to battling the systems that we're battling is that I need to be seen as an artist in my administrative capacities. I'm an artist beyond my administrative capacities. And my favorite part of producing is teaching everybody on the project that you are a producer. Look, you did it. You made that happen. Can we think about this, right? There is a whole system that has taught people that the job is to come into the room, as an artist, is to come into the room, throw a fit for what you want, and then you will get it. And that is so harmful. That is really dehumanizing, and it does not honor all of the people behind the scenes who do a lot of work to make sure that this incredible story needs to get told, and needs to be shared for all of the reasons that we all love to tell stories. I do it for connection, I do it for community, I do it to pay people. And I want to stop pretending that it's not a part of a bigger system that is trying to keep us down. I think that there are ways that we can publicly acknowledge exactly where we are, exactly what the system is doing, exactly who it is dehumanizing and humanizing, and getting better at that might actually help us to control it and shape change a little more actively. So my dream for the field is really just that as I'm doing whatever this doula work is that I see myself doing, that it becomes okay to actually just be really frank. No, you're here to, I know your ego is caught up in this, but you are here to work. And that can be okay. We're gonna make sure that it's as fun work as it possibly can be. But can that be for everybody and not just you? can that be for all of the people that have been invited into this space?
I'll keep mine short. I
Long.
think the thing that I'm doing differently is more a wish for myself than I think a wish for the field. It is to constantly find things that are low risk, high reward in my day-to-day or with my team. Some of those things, it can be silly. I think something that I'm also bringing to this work is that it's not so serious. Like it is, but it isn't. We're all making it up. We're all figuring it out. We're all on this boat together, just trying to wade through these rocky waters and get somewhere really exciting or really transformative. In that way, how can we keep this light? How can we have fun with one another? And how can, specifically inside of an independent producing practice, how can I create circumstances for myself and for my team that are low risk and high reward, because so much of what we do takes years to see the benefits of. And if something takes years of time, if it takes 2 years to put a project together and you're only getting that endorphin hit after those 2 years, of course the 23 months leading up to that is going to feel awful. It's not going to feel like this is why you want to be part of this field, why you want to be part of this, glorious connection that is this ecosystem. So the more that you can find that for yourself, and also the more power you can find for yourself. We do things that are so collaborative all the time. I love that about this field, but also you are complete on your own. You can make a meal on your own. You can have a little embroidery project on your own. You can finish that series on your own. Sometimes it is very powerful to just say, I can do this thing on my own. And that in itself, that feeds me to go back into the trenches of this work and make, life possible and make theater possible.
Sorry, but I think we have to go on to the next panel. So really, thank you both for sharing, and very openly, and as you say, honestly, that means a lot to us. And so thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing. So let's go on to the next panel.
Thank you, everybody.
And maybe we have a Q&A session afterwards, and we have Anne-Marie, Tess, and Lai-Lin. So again, thank you. Thank you for coming, participant. Let's move on right to the next panel. The quick question is: producing, self-producing, or producers coming together with a first-time self-producing artist. What is important to know? So maybe we make also the little round first. Say who are you, and what is your connection to New York theater world?
Of course. I'm Anne-Marie Dorr, they, them. I am a theater maker. I have functioned in a number of institutions, the Bushwick Star, currently at the Brick Theater in the interim artistic producing role. And I have spent a lot of time in new play and devising world and working with self-produced playwrights. That's how I came into this world over a decade ago.
And you're at the Brick at the moment.
I am at the Brick at the moment.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Tess Howsam, she, her, and I am the artistic director of Culture Lab, LIC, just out in Long Island City, Queens, looking at New York. And I have been self-producing a scrappy multi-hyphenate for over a decade now. And I love working with first-time producers, sometimes, many-year producers, and we find some way to produce together again in a very new way. So I'm here for that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sophia Engelsberg. I run the Brooklyn Center for Theater Research in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. We are a theater collective and an event space. We're very much a self-producing entity that is still kind of figuring out where it lives within the world of institutions and the world of self-produced, very niche underground theater. So thanks for having me.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lai-Lin Robinson. My pronouns are she, her. I am an independent creative producer. I'm also a performance artist. And my work is really rooted in supporting Black and women of color, identifying non-gender conforming artists who are single vision, they have their own institutions, and a lot of my work is really rooted in naming and claiming the ways in which we are choosing to work. Like the panel before really talked about, you know, what the landscape looks like, what it used to look like, and I'm really interested in having conversations on what these canons of women vision and how we're choosing to work based in community engagement, community building, and also challenging this definition of what a producer is that many of us have been producing under many different job titles for many different years. And I always like to say that it's a fad job now, that you know, I have mentors who we always say, if you've ever put together a family engagement, you've produced something. So, which, you know, all of the different things that come with that. So, and also looking at what this relationship between an artist and a producer looks like, and what we can do and what the field can do to continue to support and nurture all the nuances that come with it.
So tell us a bit of experiences in your life, in your work, when you work with this artist who normally has produced it by him or herself or themselves, and now is a collaboration with a producer. How did it go? How did it work?
You go. I can go. So my experience in producing comes directly from my experience as an actor. And I'm a very young producer. I'm only 2 years out of my undergrad. But when I first graduated, I started working with my creative partner, Matt Gazda, who is on a different panel in Brussels right now. But we started working together as an actor and a playwright with a larger company. And I realized that my goal as an actor was to expand the audience to just to make it more expansive in general. And I started to realize that I was limiting myself and just looking at this as like, oh, I'm an actor who's playing a role, and how can I begin to think about this production overall and start to market it and advertise it and bring in new people based on what I had learned and based on what I was like coming into as a new actor in this like New York downtown scene. And so we together started to find a more like commercial way to approach the work, and since then have like really developed a whole collective company that I think has inspired more work across the board of like self-producing artists that aren't waiting for someone to be like, for an institution to give them a ton of money and to create, but just to say we've found the right people and we found the right space, and if this work can continue, it will do that because it's self-serving itself, and so. I'm rambling a little bit.
Okay. No, so you work out of a loft, you know, where you host artists and work. Maybe let's go to the culture. But how is your model? How does your model work?
So Culture Lab is this beautiful, I want to say, like, you know, there are a lot of established places, and those are awesome. And I forget who said it, but like, there's a beauty in like remodeling actively all the time that has to be acknowledged. And I think the number one thing to share is when I meet with someone, be it a curator doing an exhibition, a dance group, a musician, a theater artist, the first thing I have to ask is, what do you need and what do you want? And then we can have a dialogue about like, how can I help you get specifically what you need? And if I can figure out how to get you what you want, I'm gonna do it. But I think that's sort of like the beginnings phase. Is like, what do you need? What do you want? How can we get there together? And what our space is very unique, right? We're a renovated warehouse, which we love. That does mean that there are some extra challenges, right? Like the lighting grid is 20 feet up. And this year I'm very delighted to share with you all that I can now drive a scissor lift. So if you need help, I'll help you. But before, that wasn't something I was able to offer. So I think also as a producer, kind of stepping in and seeing what does my institution need to help people succeed and tell the story better, and how can I then take on some of that learning and growth while also maintaining my mental health and well-being, as the last panel talked to. The emotional labor of being a producer with many different artists is something we don't talk about a lot about. And also, I also want to say that each art type needs something different, right? So like how I present or how I interact with you, if you're a curator wanting to bring the Van Gogh art show, to Culture Lab will be very different than what the musician needs who's doing a show. So I think also being aware that no one size fits all is how I have to approach things at Culture Lab. So when you're doing a project at Culture Lab, I also do want to equally be transparent with you about our limitations, because I don't want to be promising you the world and you to be disappointed. I'd rather be like, I don't know, and then magically we get there together. I'd rather start in a very transparent way with you than fail you later on in life, so to speak.
Big changes at the Brick. How do you deal with it?
How am I dealing with it? Great question. The Brick for me, I have made work there with companies over the years. Before Teresa's time, during Teresa's time, was in the space as an artist and appreciated so much how Teresa gave me the space to try the things I wanted to try during that time. In the producing model at the Brick, it's 50-50 split. We're offering you the space. We want you to do something in the space. Obviously, in times of transition, a lot of institutions are going through transition right now and trying out different shared leadership models. So right now, it's very much, since August, been getting on our feet to be, how do we work together? How do these 5 people run this space? And we have 2 spaces. So that is the unique challenge I personally have right now. And we're often supporting emerging artists, so it's somebody's first time putting up a show and being like, I have $10,000 to $20,000 to do something for 1 weekend, 2 weekends, 3 weekends. And so we're just aiming to still offer that time and space and experience that Teresa really built over these past 5 years. And I think I have a lot of questions about that model, sitting in that model right now. But I think, to Tess's point, there's also for us some meeting that we're in interdisciplinary space, and how do we meet different artists' needs within the quirkiness of our little brick garage, and how do, in my many years of experience, working with visual artists and video install, is I'm going to have a different conversation than the way I'm going to have a conversation with a playwright like Ryan Haddad, or when I work with Peter and Julia, Peter Millsweiss and Julia Mountsie. They're all really different conversations and with different aims and thinking about the life of the work. And I think that's an important thing that we have to think about, both when we're sitting in an institution, and then also often my role has been sitting as the advocate for the artist between the institution and the artist.
Do you all, oh, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna, so I don't currently work for an institution. I worked with Urban Bush Women for about 10 years. And in my early career there, I was fortunate enough to be rooted in their core values. A lot of it is building trust and co-creating. So for me, the process was really about building trust. There's a lot of these artists who I've worked with, they've been producing their own work for decades. And being brought into the artistic process was something that I think we're still navigating is how do producers exist in the artistic process? Like, what are, like, even looking at the artistic process as a stage, and like, you know, something that's just a seed in your head, and like, how are you talking about it with a producer? And do you have the budget to meet with them once a week to tease out an idea before you've even entered into the possibility of how it could exist in reality? So I think it's looking at like, what is this dream space, and how can we actually have this conversation together? If I don't know you, how are you trusting that I am understanding your vision the way you're articulating it? If an artist has been in the studio by themselves, grappling with research, and it's based in perhaps their own personal lives and experiences, to come to a producer and say, hey, this is a type of work that I want to do, that stuff takes time. Like, I want to be in the studio, I want to be in the research. I'm working with an artist who is doing a project based on Black farmers and our connection to land, and I want to be working on the farm with her. And that takes time. That's not something that you can easily ask these foundations to say, hey, do you have $50K so I can put a budget in our project budget so that my producer can come learn about the work that they're producing? Because to me, that is what is the foundation to making those decisions really fast when the show is about to open in 12 hours. So I think that the hardest part is really looking at what are the tools to building trust, in the same way that you're thinking about how things are continuously changing. Like I always say, producing, the definition changes based on the project. Like, I could decide what our definition is now, and we could do another project and be like, that's different. Like, what are we doing here? And you have to build another layer of trust, and also lean into the discomfort that comes with that. Like, how are we actually having these uncomfortable conversations in understanding when things are working and not working?
Just as a question, since you are, in a way, a new generation, a generation that also has to reinvent what was there before in a new context, I think Anne said before, we have to look at now, you know, what is needed. What are you looking for now? What work inspires you, where you say yes or no? What is, it might intuitively, but what are your seismographic needle where you say, okay, that's interesting?
Well, I can speak to Culture Lab, right? Not everybody's this way, but I'm most personally interested in work that pushes it to be inclusive of different mediums, right? So if you're blending dance with something else or theater with something else, I think I'm seeing a lot of hybrid or multidisciplinary theater, dance, visual art coming into my sphere, at least. And I don't know if that's like because of the way that Culture Lab is positioning ourselves to receive that work, but I find that very exciting because it feels like we're all sort of developing something new together. To that end, I also want to say that, you know, there's such a lack of support for the development process that it feels like there's this pressure, like you have to know that it's going to be this thing, that thing, and there's no space to like kind of, you know, muck around a little bit. And so something that I am really proud that Culture Lab does offer is we do have an emergence artist residency program for performance-based artists. And typically those artists we see are blending different modes of storytelling. And they get a whole year in access to free space, and we do peer reviews and check-ins throughout the way. And then that child, in whatever phase it's in, is sort of birthed, the initial birth. And I really respond to the doula metaphor because my emergence artists call me their art doula. So I'm like, oh, it's gonna be okay, like, we got this. And I think that there's something wonderful about that because there is still, I mean, I know I still feel it from the way that I was raised in theater and storytelling was sort of deeply rooted in a fear of failure, and a feeling that if I didn't turn out a new product every year, I couldn't find funding. because no one wanted to fund the same project I'd been wanting to work on for 2 years. You know, they're like, oh, well, the first year that's sexy, second year, I don't know, is it still happening? Nobody cares, you know. So I think for me as a producer in these institutions is sort of trying to like change that. Like, this is phase one. There's going to be many phases of something. Nothing comes out fully baked and perfect. That's ridiculous to put that pressure on ourselves. So I may have strayed from the question, but there you have it.
Can you repeat the question again?
What are you looking for? You produce work, and as we hear these kind of doula work, and we say push, and yes. So how do you select? What's on your mind? What you feel it should be seen?
That's an interesting question, because I actually asked myself, you know, it's this whole thing about how do you say no, like it's standing in the no, but I'm like, actually, what am I saying yes to? Because there are some projects that I did last year that I was like, this is not serving me, and what am I doing? What am I doing here again? I think what I'm looking for is, one is I want to work with artists and art that are aligned with my values and how I want to work. That seemed very, thinking of it solo, it seems very unrealistic, because, you know, we do live in a racist, white hierarchical society that we can't change in our lifetime, unfortunately. I mean, I don't want to knock it if we can, but I don't think that we can. And so sometimes when you're actively choosing how you want to work, it can feel unrealistic. But aligning with people and artists who want to take the time that it takes to do things in the way that the art deserves. So coming into the room with care, like, that is the one thing, is working with empathy and care is something that I think we often lose, because we have urgency, we have deadlines, we have money that we need to account for. And also art that is challenging how we are conditioned and have been taught to think about the world.
I think being having a company that is very much not an institution means that, like, we don't receive any outside funding or like large amounts of financial support. So what we have to focus on is being very transparent with actors and playwrights and designers and producers, that like the work that you are the work that we are coming together as a group to do should be serving you. And so I always say to playwrights whose work that we're producing is like, this is your play. How do you want your play to be received? Who do you want to write about your play and experience your play? And if it's young people, which is kind of where our focus has been for the past year, is bringing in a new audience who doesn't necessarily experience traditional theater. I think for me, what I'm always looking for is just to aid a playwright's process and bringing it to fruition, with the full transparency that like this, we're not going to pay. We can't pay you a living wage. None of us are making a living wage doing theater in this loft, but we might be able to get it seen by someone who can elevate that work. And until, yeah, that's.
I might take off one of many hats right now. I don't know, too many hats. I think right now, aesthetically, I want work that I'm most attracted to work that I feel has an element of chaos. I feel it in my groin. It's got a little fuck you to it. Yeah, I think that is what I want to work with, and like that can look quiet and that can look a lot of different ways right now or feel a lot of different ways, but if it's not shifting something for me, I'm probably not going to say yes to it as a collaborator. I think sitting in an institution or sitting in my role as a curator with the Williams College presenting series, I have different considerations of that, but that is me as an individual in this room with all of you today.
coming also slowly to an end. We have some time, but still, if someone comes to you with a project, what do you wish you would include or tell you, or someone wants to come with a project, what do you feel is important from an artist side when they come to you and present a work, or what do you feel what's sometimes missing? How do you facilitate that conversation?
I think something that's been coming up for me a lot when people present new work and ask if I would be interested in producing it as a solo producer, or the Brooklyn Center would be interested in producing it as a company, is I'm very cautious about the consideration of actors. Because I am an actor myself, first and foremost, and producing is relatively new and something that I've taken to very quickly, and I'm happy to be on this panel, so I hope I can say well. But I think sometimes when you don't have these parameters in place, union regulations and all these things to protect actors, protect designers, protect artists, you have to be the advocate for the artist who will be giving their time and energy. And I've walked away from a few projects this year just because I've been like, this director is not equipped to handle handle the subject matter and the material of this project, or this space doesn't support the project and the way that it should. And sometimes it's like, sorry, Frank, I want to make sure I'm holding to your question right. But I think for me, my priority recently has been actors and making sure that they're heard and supported in every way possible. Yeah, thanks.
Just as an open question, yeah.
So I guess for me, what I want, or what I hope I can foster, is artists coming to me and holding space for vulnerability, of excitement for the project. I want to know what it's going to feel like when I walk into that space, from like checking in at the box office to finding my seat. You know, are you know, what is the consideration of my movement through space as your audience member? And I kind of approach, I guess, like producing in that way. You know, I want to know, like, do I want to see this work? Do I want to go through this experience? Will this be enjoyable? Will it be hard? Is that work that I want to put myself through? And so I guess I would ask, you know, even if it's like sketching visuals, or, you know, trying to illustrate as best as possible, sort of like, what is the dream version of this? You know, I always say, like, let's go big. Let's go, like, there's no limit. Like, what does it look like? And then we can always, like, scale back into our realities. But come so I can, like, smell the room and taste the room with you first.
I guess that an artist coming to me asking me to produce their work is a model that I don't really work within, so I struggle with the question a little bit. But I think that a lot of it, there's a question that someone asked me that I really liked, and they were like, can you tell me what feeds your soul? And I guess that's a great description for how I'd like for an artist to approach me, is, can you tell me how this project feeds your soul? And I literally just thought of it right now, because I'm usually just like, I want to hear about the project and how it makes them feel and what it's about. And where do you see this aspiration? Like, no budget in mind. I want us to be able to dream together. And then also, like, just thinking about what their definition of success looks like. Like, they could say that this project is something they want to work in the studio with, like 10 dope artists, and it never see a stage ever. And for us to be like, okay, that's cool, we just made some dope shit together, and it was 10 months, and you know, so I think that's kind of how I'd like to build that relationship.
I just want to say what I love about that is also the sharing of expectations. Like, please share your expectations, right? Like, it's just like, it sets the tone for what we're trying to do together. Yeah.
Yeah, I think adding to that, something I've learned along the way or that feels particularly valuable to me right now is transparency in process and those initial conversations. Like I can, you go on a date with somebody and you're like, tell me about the project, what's going on, how much money do you have, okay. But like, you can tell how responsive they are to my transparency also about being like, here are my boundaries, or like, this is how I like to work, or like, this is the money that I need for how many months you're gonna work on this project with me, how we're all gonna work on this project together. And I think, thinking a lot about values and how that shows up in those initial conversations, but transparency feels pretty key these days for me.
Before we come to the next panel, maybe a last question. Let's say someone gives you $500,000 or $1 million. What would you do? What is your dream project? What would you can't do at the moment, but you really want to do? What do you have on your mind?
That's an easy one for me. So I just closed a conversation series called When Black Women Plus Speak, which convened organizations and institutions in New York that have Black or women of color at the helm. And we convened producers working in dance, theater, music, and we talked about the processes and models in which we want to work in. And that was a shared resource for us to be able to hear from each other, but also to share the things that we're learning, that we're grappling with, because sometimes it can feel really lonely in this work. And it feels good to be like, hey, you just dealt with that Tuesday. I was dealing with that 2 months ago, and here are some things that can help you feel and navigate that system or experience. So I would like to just build on that conversation and be able to support the work that other producers are doing, to be able to share in a resource of tools and communication and community to be able to do the work that we want to do instead of the work that we have to do.
$500,000? Okay. I got lots I'd spend that money on. But I think one of the things I would invest that $500,000 on would be hiring additional staffing support for me and my team and all of you bringing your projects to me. Because I think that is really where I know I struggle the most, because there's only so much of me, and we were talking about pie charts in the last conversation, and having to protect my limitations and boundaries, then how that then affects the number of projects that can get done, and it feels unfair because there's space, and you want to take them all in and adopt all the cats, and it's like, you need a bigger house before you adopt all the cats. So I think I would invest in staffing support for projects. And resources for teams bringing themselves and their energy and their creative dreams to my space, so that they could be held even more supportively while they're going through their birthing process of this art. I think that's the central need for me.
I think practically, I would restore our building, or maybe buy our building, and then be able to really make that established place. But I also would love to take the company that we have now and do the most magical big production that we could do. And I know that's just like a dream, but to always be working in such confined, like intimate, hyper realistic spaces, my goal with like a ton of money would be to do the opposite, and to see how these people these actors and these creatives who have worked with nothing could work with everything. Yeah, we'd do some Shakespeare.
I think I'd steal the tenet that we worked on with While You're Partying at SoHo Rep, which is paying everyone in the room to be there and paying them a living wage, and see how far that could get us. And then my other producing thing that I've thought a lot about and tried to integrate into my own personal work is access practices, and how do we include that from the beginning of a project and not just tack on one night of ASL interpretation? How do we not just tack on one audio described performance? How can accessibility be part of the process?
And Frank, also, $500,000 is not enough.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. We're at CUNY, so that's, yeah, if NYU, it would be $5 million.
You mean it's a yearly gift?
Yeah, yeah.
Monthly
Well,
gift.
thank you so much. And I know we can only scratch
you.
the surface, but really, thank you for being with us. And we move up to our next panel. Thank you, Genée and Eric and Molly. Can you take this chair right there? So I think the mic should still be on. Maybe we start with you. Tell it who you are and in what context.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eric Emauni. I am a creative producer. I am the founder of Iconic Vision Productions, which is a commercial producing company. I'm also the artistic coordinator at PAC NYC, Cat Segal Center, if you don't know what that place is. And I'm also one of the Prince Fellows this year at Columbia University.
Hi, my name is Molly FitzMaurice. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the managing producer of The Tank.
Hi, everyone. I'm Genée Coreno. I'm the new artistic director at Wham Theater in the Berkshires, and I've been self-producing under the company name Fringe and Fur in New York. She, her pronouns.
Yeah, so we don't have to completely stick to the panel theme, but the big ideas, and I hope some of the audience, but also viewers are out here, it is really about how to produce, how to do first steps, what to do. And we heard earlier that we said, do something, learn, make mistakes. But what is something where you think, I wish I would have known that when I started out, so we can transfer experience, the very first things you did?
Okay. Well, this fall I produced for the first time as an artistic director, and that was something very different. In my creative practice, I was rehearsing 2 or 3 times a week, and it was very ordinary for me to be a director. I wanted that to not be something extraordinary with extraordinary pressure. I wanted that space where people can come in and stretch and talk, and so I started off this really very repertory theater show, which is also a departure from my devised work, and truly was like, I'm not the artistic director, I'm just another person in the room. And I think when you do walk into a space that has a history, you have to be mindful and aware of that. And then also I think knowing your title does flag different things and different power dynamics for different people. So it is true, I am an artistic director, and there's part of that is like cultivating this really deep and meaningful relationship with artists, and the other part is like a little bit of like maintaining the product. And so knowing when to lean into that title as a superpower and as something that can really support the process and the artist, and not underestimate that changes power in the room.
Okay. So at The Tank, we offer free performance space for emerging artists. We do about 300 unique projects a year in a sort of
300, just to repeat it, yeah.
In a sort of perpetual festival model, right? So we have 2 theaters. There's always more than one show in each theater. There's usually more than one show each night. So I see a pretty big sample size of folks producing their very, very first show. And I was also young once. And so what I would say that I see that like breaks my heart a little bit is folks like really rushing toward this sort of like perceived sheen of professionalism, or what they think would make their show like real in some way, and skipping over what they like actually most want to do and how they most want to do it. So for example, like I was in a company right out of college that rushed to like, we have to get our 501c3 status, we have to form a board, we have to define the mission. And I would say that same group of people would have been more successful if they just started like making stuff. We at The Tank, we offer fiscal sponsorship. Don't get a 501c3 until you absolutely need to, please. And we are also like a space that equivalent terrible 98-seat theaters rent for $5,000 a week or whatever. Don't do that first, right? Like pay your people first if you have 5 cents to scratch together.
For me, I've kind of worked in every level of theater, from the smallest spaces and organizations all the way up to the big scale Broadway version of things. And on the one end, I wish there was like a reality check of like, just do the work. Just dive into the work. Like, it doesn't have to be Broadway when you just started. It doesn't have to be what everyone else thinks it needs to be. It doesn't have to be all the bells and whistles. Put something on paper and do the work. And then on the grander scale, on that side, particularly working on Broadway, like, I wish people were just transparent about the actual boundaries that are in place that keep artists out of being able to make the work. It's incredibly frustrating to constantly be in spaces where we know it's inequitable, but no one wants to do anything about it.
Tell us a little bit more about those.
Um,
Go hold a little bit closer, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Jesus, where do you want me to start? For instance, as a Broadway producer, and I really hate using that term, but if that's what we're going by, as a Broadway producer, the barrier of access that you have to be able to produce on Broadway as the bare minimum as a co-producer, you have to be able to raise $250,000. That's the floor, and there is no rhyme or reason for that. There is no like. No one can give you a legitimate like, oh, we're doing this because it serves some purpose. It's arbitrary. People can make up whatever rule they want to. Somehow, people have landed at 250 and just think that is the thing to do. Particularly now in today's economy, like that's just not going to work. People aren't coming up off that kind of money anymore. People aren't funding that kind of money anymore. So like, why don't we change it?
Yeah, I know Broadway people say now it's like 4 to 6 million, even an off Broadway. It's like Playwrights Horizon, it's 800,000 to $1 million to do a show. How do you guys raise the money? How do you make things possible? How do you do 300 shows a year?
We don't raise that money. So there are a couple things that make our model sustainable. The first is working at such a high volume means that in our last fiscal year, about 50% of our operating budget was earned revenue rather than contributed, which is like really, really shocking compared to pure organizations. Tickets are like about $15 each, and we give a split of, we don't keep all of that, a split of that goes back to every artist who walks through our door. But like, just having that is really, it's not enough money. It does not self-fund, but it really, really stabilizes us as an institution. We're dependent on grants and individual contributions as much as anybody. And we also, our model is entirely presenting or co-producing, so there's no show that walks through the tank that the tank like is like, here is all of the resources you need. So I'm always, always, always in meetings with artists saying like, okay, what do you want to do? Here are the in-kind and cash resources that we can offer you, and like, how are you going to make up the difference, or how are you going to make different decisions if you can't? Something that you made me think about that I was like a bee in my bonnet is I feel like it's like really chic as a producer to be like, I find my way to yes. I never lead with no. And it's like, no, I lead with no all the time, because you've got to know what the container is, and then you can play in the container rather than being like the bird that flies into the glass and dies. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to find the real container and be real about it, and then like figure out how to do it.
WHAM Theater has a budget of $550,000, and it's pretty evenly split between individual, corporate support, and grants. And I think the great thing about, while we're a 15-year institution, we still keep to kind of our grassroots principles. We're an activist organization. We tell stories about women and girls, and then we give proceeds from ticket sales to community-based organizations that support women and girls in direct services. And so I think the great thing is that we are not afraid to be flexible and say this year is not a year that we can bring on more. We may be investing in our staff and or our community engagement program, but we can't do all of it. So we really practice this principle of my managing director, Molly Merrihew, of scaffolding. And so it's like, how do we gradually build to where we want to go, and how do we communicate that very clearly with those that are partnering with us? And again, yeah, co-productions help a lot, and the Berkshires is a very unique place where at least our company doesn't have a big building. And so we don't have to worry about the overhead of that, and we contribute to the economy in seasons when those companies wouldn't otherwise have programming. And then we can kind of also elevate each other in that partnership, whether it's with Mass Mocha or Shakespeare and Company or The Mount or something like that.
I'm split. So on the organizational side, PAC NYC, not my job, not my business to raise money. I can give you advice. I can suggest to you places to go to. I can introduce you to donors. I can do all of those things. It is up to you, high people up there, to do the work in terms of bringing those resources into fruition, which means you have to do work that those people are interested in. Again, above my payroll. But when it comes to my company, it is, I like to scale things. Like I said before, I start very small. Put something on paper, do the work first. So let me see what I'm working with. Let me see and understand what is needed so that I know who to go to. I'm not just gonna go out and ask somebody for $500,000 and I don't know what I'm working with, and I don't know what the end goal is, or I don't know what the vision or what we really wanna do at the end of the day. I can be incredibly resourced, and sometimes it's not always about asking for money. Sometimes it's about asking for space. Sometimes it's about asking for artistic support in terms of finding the right collaborators. It's not always about a tangible dollar. Figure out how to ask people for what you actually need that is not always money.
Yeah, that speaks a lot too. I get leadership. One thing that my company does really well, despite being under-resourced in salary, is that we get leadership training every 2 weeks, and then like on a more or less monthly basis. And that's one thing they said is like, how can you communicate what the needs of the project or the program is, and that might be like the space or the refrigerator so that the kids can have lunches or whatever, and then translate that into dollars for folks, but start where it matters to that donor, and then moving that into dollars that they can contribute to and have ownership and feel proud to be investing in, and then also making sure you're communicating what's at risk when that money doesn't come in is a really good motivator, at least in my region.
What do you all feel has to change or should change in producing and being able to go on with your work? What's wrong? What's missing?
Taste.
Tell us more.
I mean, I'm just going to be blunt about it. There is a lot of work that is across the board, Broadway, off-Broadway, whatever. There's a lot of work that is being supported and put out that, quite frankly, audiences are not wanting to see. People aren't showing up to. It's why we are turning around, and specifically looking at Broadway. You're looking at shows that open and close in 3 weeks. That's not normal. Like, yes, every show is not going to be a runaway hit and recoup and be 100% successful, but for a show to close in 3 weeks is insane. That means that your taste level is poor. Like, let's just be realistic about it and be real with each other. People need to like get out of this highbrow kind of mentality around the creating of art. And Broadway doesn't have to be this thing that is just so glitz and glamoury off in the distance. Like, it doesn't always have to be that. And quite frankly, it's not working. the economy of it is not working, and the more poor shows that you put up because of your poor taste is going to continue to ruin the fabric of what American theater is.
Wow, I clearly didn't like when you said that at all. Yeah, I mean, I would say that, like, along with taste is, like, I feel like I see a fair amount of work that is, like, for some sort of, like, imagined middle distance, like, blob audience. And I would say, like, go ahead and make something that you really, really like, because you might as well. Like, that blob stuff doesn't do well either. Like, the room temperature stuff isn't, like, actually selling. It's closing in 3 weeks, too, so you might as well make something really weird that you really, really, really like, and that fulfills your taste, whether or not it's good. Yeah, so taste seems like a great idea. And I would say that, like, along with that is that it's like the taste stuff, and it's I don't know, I like, the tank is super duper scrappy. I think when somebody famously said that all of our chairs look like they've been stabbed. And I like sometimes mortified. I'm like, oh my God, our AC broke and everybody hated it. And then I went to like a super fancy reading at Pearl the other day where it was like 1 million degrees. Like, there's no like place where it's all perfect and everybody is so good and everything is unimpeachable and you've made it. Like, there's 0 places that are like that, so just do something you really dig.
I think 3 things come to mind. One is I've been thinking about this quote by Derrida talking about Kant that says hospitality is a welcome without reservation, and I think also hesitation. So I've been thinking about like the quality of the encounter, like how, though I'm stuck in a SPT4 contract with AEA and I can only afford 3 weeks before we tech the show, like how am I building out these like high value, intimate interactions with the artists who are coming into a space that is very remote. Like, I'm in a very rural space. There's a kind of allure around the Berkshires that doesn't really, or even just like a story that we tell about that place that's not true for most of the people who live there. And so, yeah, I got lost in that because that makes me emotional. So I'm trying to think about ways to make that interaction meaningful so that we can break down, like the other panelists have said, the conversations around truly what does collaboration mean to you? What do you imagine the role of the production manager being? It's very different in every space you walk into. And so that we can really not cultivate necessarily like a safe space, but one of belonging and bravery. And I think that just takes time, and we often don't have time. And so however we can find ways to meet people and have that be really quality and long-standing is important, I think, and one that is really hard in this financial moment. The other thing I'm thinking about is I'd really like to change what the expectation around the audience's role is. I think my audience is wonderful because they understand the context of our mission, and I learned this year that they understand our intention. Like, they're invested in us enough to understand what the intention of the selection process was. The other thing I would like them to grow into is learning that they are themselves activists, not just for the women and girls in these community-based organizations, but also for the artist, the woman artist who story can't fit in a play that might need to be a dance or might need to be like a spoken word or any kind of form that it wants to take, and that there's great vision that we all need to be investing in, because I do see large-scale projects around the world being funded when there's male directors, and I don't see that type of brand and corporate investment in female artists, and I'd like to see that change. And then finally, the press. There needs to be more women critics and gender diverse critics, and they need to understand that though they wish the play was looks and feels they would like the play to be something it's not. And the female playwright has written the play the way she wants to write it, and you need to meet that artist where they are and see what they're trying, where you are in their path, you know, and where you're trying to get them to go. So I just feel like there needs to be a revisioning, and the Boys Club needs to open up in terms of critics, because we can't stifle that story. That story doesn't have to look linear and cleaned up and perfect. And I think in order for us to undo the misogyny inside of ourselves as women and the white supremacy and all of that, we have to have structures around us that allow us to measure ourselves differently inside of that or outside of that. So yeah, those are the 3 things I would change.
If I can add 2 more things. Because you just said it and it reminded me of it. Time. We can slow down. Like, we actually can. The artists that I work with, there comes a point in time where like they actually really like want to kick my ass because I'm like, slow down. Like, who are you racing against? Why are you trying to do this at a feverish pace that like is burning you out and making you unhappy? Pause. Focus. Take the time that you need to create the work. Every resource that you need will be able to come to you if you slow down. We don't have to do everything and like honestly put blindfolders on sometimes. Like, stop paying attention to everyone else and take your time. And the other thing that you said about the blob that's just kind of there in terms of like work that's being created, I actually wish that there was more specificity. The more specific the work is, actually the more people that you're attracting. I don't want a McDonald's show like that. I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me. Make it specific, make it interesting. You'll not only get the audience that needs to see it, but then the fact that it's so specific will start making other people be interested in the work and pull other people into it.
That's interesting to me too, because I looked at my audience and I'm like coming from New York and I'm like, who are these people? And they're, you know, an older audience, and they were very nondescript to me. And what was really helpful was we have an elder ensemble at WHAM that's women over 65, and they come together in a devised theater process. And I remember being in the office one night late, and they were saying, I heard a woman saying, I have a story, but I don't know if it's one I'm allowed to tell on stage, and I don't know if it should be on a stage. And so I thought, oh, like a lot of the lack of transmission here is also that like generational, like not feeling that permission to have shared about their personal abortion or their childhood abuse or their grief, and the feeling of being invisible as an older person. So I was like, oh, I wish I had like a young, you know, the brick. I wish I was still in the brick making my work in front of that audience. I felt like suddenly I had a little bit more of like an understanding. So I guess another thing I've learned is, how do you cultivate your audience the way you would a donor? Like, you do spend individual time with them if you can, if you're in that situation. And so I think that's also like really valuable. It like actually gives you specificity into your audience and your audience into your work.
I want to circle back to what you said about press, which is like the landscape is really barren. And so one of my like little soapboxes right now is like, everyone in this room is 3 blog posts away from being like one of the most important reviewers of independent theater. I'm like so serious. Like, if you have stuff to say about the work you're seeing, just like please put it out there, and they will only be grateful. And like that is the sort of like the dialogue and the cultivation of an audience and a teaching of what it means to be in this community that I think is like not quite happening right now, and that I think like is like right there for you to take.
Something you shared about time too is like the value of time is also like, as we're creating spaces that are inclusive and welcoming without reservation or hesitation, time, like we had every collaboration process has bumps. So there was a bumpy moment in a process recently, and I was like, oh, I wish that there was the like resiliency of this relationship. And I think like that we can have conflict. We can say, hey, like I need to have a come to Jesus with you out in the hallway, and we can go for a walk and have a difficult talk and like come back and be okay. But that takes having known, like time and trust built. You can't have those hard conversations that this moment is calling for because you're in such a pressure cooker and every moment matters and it's a representation of your own character even though you're just learning and making mistakes. So another really important value of time.
Yeah, certainly it's a time of change we live in, of radical change. Bertolt Brecht, the great writer, said, new times need new theater. Milo Rao, great Vienna director, says we have to radically ask ourselves, what are we doing? We have to question everything, whether you're a writer, a director, producer, a supporter, what do we do? What is important? What is urgent? It's a time of extremes. The small tank produces 300 shows. I don't know, the Brick is close most probably. The Shed did 2 shows this year, 2 British shows. They showed it. It was 650 million, I think, to build. I mean, it's incredible what is happening. In the moment, it will be also incredible to see where this all will be going to. But what we do need is we need a theater. It's important to all of us. But also we have to reconnect to audiences. I think what politicians see them as voters, businesses, people as consumers, and we have to also go beyond that they are just ticket buyers. I think all what you say, the engagement, the real engagement, it is something that is important for us, and also in that moment to use public spaces to reconnect to people, to have an active participation in this democracy, but also in the theater to represent us on stage. The way it's produced equals our ideals we talk about. I think this is what comes out of today. So there is a lot to be thinking about. We have maybe more questions than we had before, but I thought this day really took a temperature of what is on people's mind, what are we thinking, and hopefully all of you got some kind of inspiration. We have time for a couple of questions for everybody. I know some panelists has to go back and also did other things, but maybe we can have some comments, some questions for everybody who's in here, and then we have a little reception. Yeah, it was. Here. Maybe say who you are.
Yes, hi. My name is Hind. I'm an actress about to produce my own work, and I was hoping to hear if you have any advice to new producers that are here, hoping like this is their first project, from your mistakes, because I heard from different panels that you learned from your mistakes. So I was hoping to hear some of the mistakes or things that we need to know, exactly what I wish I knew before I produced my first show, so to learn from your experiences. Thank you.
I mean, I kind of mentioned it in one of my answers before, like, when I first started producing, I had the mindset of, like, I have to, like, keep doing things, and I have to push it out, and, like, I have to, like, keep up with everybody else, and that was a huge failure on my part. Every project that I was working on with that mindset came up against so much bullshit because that's the space that I was in. I was attracting that crazy energy because of whatever reason. Once I was able to like calm down and center myself and take the time to like really focus on the important pieces of my work is when I really got clarity. It's when I really was able to ground myself in what my goals were and where I wanted to take things. And, you know, doing something for the first time like that it's going to be a challenge regardless of what stage you're in, who you're working with, what money you have. There are going to be challenges. But keep yourself grounded. Keep yourself in a space where you are open to whatever is happening, good or bad, and let the process fuel what you have to do, if that makes sense. That was a very lofty answer, but I hope it helped.
Yeah, I mean, the entire day was about it, but it's a big question. Yeah.
Yannis Ziligakis. I haven't yet produced my own show, but I have assisted in productions in community theater. I wanted to ask about audience expansion, and what do you think producers need to do better in order to increase their outreach? And we're coming from an election, and you saw how the politicians did a novel outreach in order to bring people into the political process, let's say, who were not participating? Do you think we can do something similar in theater?
Something we do at WAM to increase engagement is we offer caregiver stipends, which never covers the full cost of childcare or elder care, but it does make a gesture, and it makes sure that we hold a line for that in the future as we're planning and expanding. So every year it's in our budget, and so we know that we have to, or we will talk about it at least. The other thing is with our community engagement programs specifically, they're free. We find grant funding for that, and that's typically something it's easy to communicate your impact through quantitative data, how many people you supported, and or also talk to an individual donor and say, we need this, it's important because. But that allows us to not only make the program free for the individuals participating, but free for the audience to attend. And then we also pay a performance stipend to all participants in our teen ensemble and elder ensemble. So it's like one way towards a future where it's free to come to our main stages, which isn't possible right now, but even with our main stage, we always have either a babysitter or a stipend available. So that's very useful for us, I think.
Yeah, another question. Also, Blake Seidel this afternoon said TikTok is really, it was interesting, there is an important tool. He says written newspaper articles are just for fundraising anymore. People don't come because of reviews. And he's a marketing wizard, yeah.
Hi, my name's Andres. I'm a young creative producer and director, and I think a big question in regards to audience expansion is, sure, we're talking about how we want to save and cultivate the community that's currently here, but people my age have no idea about the theater going on around them. And I think we're talking about saving our community and trying to maintain that, but how are we actively trying to bring in new people into the community about ideas that have been around for, again, decades, and themes that people can support and love, but I think the big question is, how do we get young people excited in that? And especially in, again, not young, but smaller theaters throughout New York in order to create that, at least, New York community.
Do you want to answer?
Yes. Hi. Love that question. My background before I was artistic director of Culture Lab was the founding artistic director of the Exquisite Corpse Company. We're an immersive-based interdisciplinary theater company. And I think for me, what I always thought was exciting is thinking about the framework in which you're presenting the show. So like what Anne does with site-specific work, right? Like how can we make something that maybe doesn't feel accessible to people by placing it somewhere else feel more relevant perhaps? Or like, oh yeah, I would go to a bar, oh, there's a show there, sure, you know? I don't know, I feel like that's one of the tools that I've been excited about seeing. I think also something that I'm also interested in is how can the projects we're creating shatter the old expectations, if that makes any sense. Like what people assume the type of theater experience should be. We just produced a show, a dance show, and we wanted like the dance company wanted the audience to clap and to cheer and to be loud during the show, and we're trained like we sit in our chairs and we listen and then we clap when it's appropriate, so I think like also kind of like changing what the space and the rules that we hold for our audience too is something up to us as well.
I think
if I can add to that, actually, using PAC as like the case study for that, Cats was one of those things that is like, has been a phenomenon for the year. It was very specific, very, very specific. You have the whole Cats factor of like, okay, the people that love cats. And then, and then you add the layer of, okay, now we're making this Vogue ballroom element of it that is a very specific niche thing. And people just were interested in that. Like, once we got it right, we were able to get it right. And then we were able to use the tools of current age. we did a TikTok, and the TikTok went viral in like 2 days. And because of all the community outreach that we did and all the things that we did to invite people into the space, that show brought in more revenue, not only for the institution, but that show alone sold more tickets than most other organizations bring in their entire season. And it's because it was so specific.
I think also sometimes we like model our theaters to only make theater and not like maybe like a museum that might think about their role in civic engagement. Like I just was at the strategic planning for Mass Mocha, and Christy Edmonds was talking about all the ways she's tapping into an audience that's about an environment and how the institution is working to like think about the future and the future of the community that surrounds it. So thinking about the ways that you partner with different thinkers and makers within your institution and have offerings that are not theater. Like you can do an Ikebana class, like you can do, I don't know, like a pole dancing class. Like what will bring people to you to just enjoy time and space, a happy hour. We have like a tech dinner that we do with our volunteers. They make food and we open that up to folks to gather with us. So like, how are you breaking bread with your community in like a non-theatrical setting? It's really, truly okay to depart.
One last question.
Hi, I'm Marina. I'm a director and I'm pretty involved in a lot of the producing work that happens for my projects. And I wanted to ask about, there's been a lot of conversation about boundaries and like equitable payment. And I really believe in paying the people, my collaborators, but it's never like on the scale that I'm working right now, it's never enough money to really justify like the amount of time that people are being asked to put in. And so I'm curious, like across the different scales that y'all work on, what are the expectations that you feel like you can make of people based on the like amounts that you're being able to pay people, and how do those conversations shift as I feel like we're thinking a lot more about accurately allowing folks to have more boundaries around their lives in a way that I think is really healthy.
When I was self-producing, I created a schedule. It was flexible. It was led by folks' availability with the understanding that they are working in other spaces, and I would adjust what I needed to do with those available. And if that meant you called out last minute because you had an extra gig or whatever, that I understood. And for me, that worked. I mean, I was working 2 or 3 hours 3 times a week, and if it's that actor or someone else that could come in just to practice with me, I was able to kind of set that expectation. At WHAM, our founder of the organization who stepped down is Kristen Vengenhoven, and she's done a lot of work around pay equity. So something else that I'm thinking a lot about is what's the distance between the highest paid person and the lowest paid person, and being really transparent about that and growing together. So if you can bring in your collaborators to show them the vision of where you're headed and like show that growth and how you're going to get there and how they can participate, you may also have that buy-in to like that future salary that you want to be able to buy. This is what it takes. So that could also be something that's helpful.
I'm over here. I think a lot of it is a lot of what all of you have already said. Also, is transparency in what it costs. I think what a lot of gets lost when we don't put in the budget line is what it actually costs. Like, I think shared resource sharing is really helpful. Barters are really helpful as long as you're continually communicating about what you're actually bartering. One of the artists that I work with, one is you're communicating and being open about, I understand this is in no way a replacement of the fee that you actually deserve, and I want to pay you this, but this is what I can offer now, and we're continuously having a conversation on this is how much you cost. Like if your fee is $5,000, we're actively calculating what that barter equally equals to $5,000, and we're in collaboration and agreement that this is something that we're working on together, but we're continuously having a conversation on what that budget line actually equals and cost, so that when you get your $500K, and you're going to someone else, or you have a team, then they know, yes, you did it this way for however long you have, but this is the budget that we were actually working in. We just made it work this way. So I think it's having multiple conversations on what shared resources and what budget looks like, and also what are your collaborators willing to bring to the table. That is not money, as what you all said, is you may not be looking for money, but you could be looking for space. Like, I could have space, which is, like, to me, is a high commodity.
And something I love about that is that, like, the offer can't always be money and shouldn't always be money. Like, we can't, like, I want everyone to make as much money as they possibly can and, like, buy all the properties and assets, and I love that shit. But at the same time, I really want to make sure that, like, every human interaction is not commodified and, like, a dollar sign's connected to every engagement. So how can you make that engagement really meaningful? And someone asked the question of, like, what did I do wrong? I would say I would get really clear about saying, like, this is the time we negotiate your fee, and this is the time it ends, and it will not end, and figure out what would be, like, the consequence of that. I don't exactly know if there is one, because when you're not paying people much, you can't really hold them too much. But I think saying, like, we wouldn't be able to work together again if X, Y, and Z. I've just been in a lot of situations, self-producing and producing, where I'm asked to renegotiate, like, much later in situations where the scope and scale has legitimately not changed, just because they didn't think to do it or weren't feeling empowered to do it before. So that's, like, a big one for me.
If I can, if you have the privilege to, collaboration agreements are paramount in those kinds of situations. Because what I can't give you in cash right now, we can absolutely negotiate. If you're someone that I want to continue to collaborate with, or this is a good partnership, I could absolutely negotiate with you on what rights I'm willing to give you in collaborating with me on this project to keep you involved, to keep the process moving forward, because that is value. If we are moving towards the same goal and we want the same thing and we want it to be successful, and cross his fingers, like, it will do that, then that is worth something. So whatever resources you do have, I would say snatch a little bit out of that budget and get you a proper collaboration agreement and have it looked over, so that that can be the thing that you offer to people, so that if money is a thing, they know, okay, well, this is legitimate, and, like, we're moving in some kind of way. It's a cheat code for, like, oh, you're professional, yay.
And I've had so many experiences where people are, like, negotiating over $50, which isn't buying anyone's anything, but it's because the thing that they're actually missing is, like, I value you and I value your time, and this project is yours as much as it is mine. And, like, obviously I also want to pay everyone many, many, many more dollars, but no amount of dollars makes up for if somebody is not feeling that. Yeah. And that's the collaboration agreement can do that too.
So really, thank you. Big applause for the panel and everybody who's still here. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for HowlRound, for streaming us. In the last remark, we didn't go fully into it, but worldwide, also theaters and theater companies move outside the big metropolises. They are on small farms, have animals, have a theater company, run a laundromat. So and create work in a community. The great Eugenio Barba did this in the 70s, 80s, or 90s in Denmark, became also very important. So I think there's also decentralizing happening in Detroit, in Houston, in Portland, upstate New York. A lot of great stuff is happening we don't really know about, and we also encourage everybody to think about this as a form to a way of life. To work, being in the theater is also a way of making a life, living a life, and there are many, many forms. Theater is a house that has many rooms, and they can be all be inhabited. So again, thank you all, thank you for coming, and we have a little reception here. Thank you.
I mean, and also if you find out the secret,